If you've listened carefully, I think you will have noticed three different arguments emerge from this discussion in defense of considering race and ethnicity as a factor in admissions. One argument has to do with correcting for the effects of educational disadvantage. That was Anisha's argument. This is what we might call the corrective argument. Correcting for differences in educational background, the kind of school people went to, the opportunities they had, and so on. That's one argument. What's worth noticing, though, is that that argument is consistent in principle with the idea that only academic promise and scholarly potential should count in admissions. We just need to go beyond test scores and grades alone to get a true estimate of academic promise and scholarly ability. That's the first argument. Then we heard a second argument that said affirmative action is justified even where there may not be the need to correct for educational disadvantage in a particular applicant's case. It's justified as a way of compensating for past wrongs, for historic injustices. So that's a compensatory argument, compensating for past wrongs. Then we heard a different argument for affirmative action from Hannah and others that argued in the name of diversity. Now, the diversity argument is different from the compensatory argument because it makes a certain appeal to the social purpose or the social mission of the college or university. There are really two aspects to the diversity argument. One says it's important to have a diverse student body for the sake of the educational experience for everyone. Hannah made that point. And the other talks about the wider society. This was the argument made by the University of Texas in the Hopwood case. We need to train lawyers and judges and leaders, public officials, who will contribute to the strength, the civic strength of the state of Texas and the country as a whole. So there are two different aspects to the diversity argument, but both are arguments in the name of the social purpose or the social mission or the common good served by the institution. Well, what about the force of these arguments? We've also heard objections to these arguments. The most powerful objection to the compensatory argument is it fair to ask Cheryl Hopwood today to make the sacrifice, to pay the compensation for an injustice that was admittedly committed and was egregious in the past, but in which she was not implicated? Is that fair? So that's an important objection to the compensatory argument. And in order to meet that objection, we would have to investigate whether there is such a thing as group rights or collective responsibility that reaches over time. So having identified that issue, let's set it aside to turn to the diversity argument. The diversity argument doesn't have to worry about that question, about collective responsibility for past wrongs, because it says, for reasons Hannah and others pointed out, that the common good is served, is advanced, if there is a racially and ethnically diverse student body. Everyone benefits. And this indeed was the argument that Harvard made when it filed a friend of the court brief to the Supreme Court in the 1978 case, affirmative action case, the Bakke case. And the Harvard brief, the Harvard rationale, was cited by Justice Powell, who was the swing vote in the case, upholding affirmative action. He cited that as providing the rationale that he thought was constitutionally acceptable. Harvard's argument in its brief was this: we care about diversity. Scholarly excellence alone has never been the criterion of admission, the sole criterion of admission to Harvard College. 15 years ago, diversity meant students from California and New York and Massachusetts, city dwellers and farm boys, violinists, painters and football players, biologists, historians and classicists. The only difference now, Harvard argued, is that we're adding racial and ethnic status to this long list of diversity considerations. When reviewing the large number of candidates able to do well in our classes, Harvard wrote, race may count as a plus just as coming from Iowa may count, or being a good middle linebacker, or pianist. A farm boy from Idaho can bring something to Harvard College that a Bostonian cannot offer. Similarly, a black student can usually bring something a white student cannot offer. The quality of the educational experience of all students depends in part on these differences in the background and outlook that students bring with them. That was Harvard's argument. Now, what about the diversity argument? Is it persuasive? If it's to be persuasive, it has to meet one very powerful objection that we've heard voiced here by Ted, by Bree. Unless you're a utilitarian, you believe that individual rights can't be violated. And so the question is there an individual right that is violated? Is Cheryl Hopwood's right violated if she is used, so to speak, denied admission for the sake of the common good and the social mission that the University of Texas Law School has defined for itself? Does she have a right? Don't we deserve to be considered according to our excellences, our achievements, our accomplishments, our hard work? Isn't that the right at stake? Now, we've already heard an answer to that argument. No, she doesn't have a right. Nobody deserves to be admitted. Notice how this gets us back to the issue of desert versus entitlement. They're arguing there is no individual right that Hopwood has. She doesn't deserve to be admitted according to any particular set of criteria that she believes to be important, including criteria that have only to do with her efforts and achievements. Why not? I think implicit in this argument is something like Rawls's rejection of moral desert as the basis of distributive justice. Yes, once Harvard defines its mission and designs its admission policy in the light of its mission, people are entitled, who fit those criteria, they are entitled to be admitted. But according to this argument, no one deserves that Harvard College define its mission and design its admission criteria in the first place in a way that prizes the qualities they happen to have in abundance, whether those qualities are test scores or grades or the ability to play the piano or to be a good middle linebacker or to come from Iowa or to come from a certain minority group. So you see how this debate about affirmative action, especially the diversity argument, takes us back to the question of rights, which in turn takes us back to the question of whether moral desert is or is not the basis for distributive justice. Think about that over the weekend, and we'll continue this discussion next time.